All right, here we are. We are up to power rankings time of the night. So, there's some big movement this week. There was some big movement this week. There are some teams on some really hot streaks at the exact right time of the year. As we get into 2020, there's some teams that are heating up and some teams that are cooling off. So that's caused a massive shift in terms of where teams are on the board. That being said, I'm sure for some it won't be enough. For some it'll be too much. And that's where the fun of the power rankings comes in, right? That's where the fun is. All right, number 31, same as every other week. And I mean that. For the last 6 weeks, Detroit's been 31, 31, 31, 31, 31, 31, still 31, to the point where I'll have them down here with the Atlanta Thrashers, because I have a Thrashers magnet, and I didn't have a reason to use it, because of course I don't, because the Thrashers haven't existed in a long time. And I can't use that for the Winnipeg one, because then Winnipeg fans get kind of twitchy. And I understand why, but still it's kind of fun to use. And I love the Thrashers' old logo, so I have the Thrashers a little bit ahead of the Red Wings right now, even though the Thrashers haven't been an NHL team for a while. So yeah, Red Wings are still 32, showing that everything's fine in the world. By 32, I mean 31. Number 30, dropping one spot from last week and back where they were 2 weeks ago, is the Anaheim Ducks. Yeah, for the Ducks, this continues to be a really trying season. And I don't know where this ends other than without a playoff spot. There's very little, if any, chance that the Ducks grab themselves a playoff spot with the way they've been playing lately. And so, yeah, Anaheim is number 30 on the board currently. Could they move up? That's possible, but with the injuries, the not scoring, the middle-of-the-road goaltending they've even been getting from Gibson at times, I don't know if there's any hope. All right. That review loaded fast. Good. That's because it's shorter, because there were only 7 games in tonight's review, so bonus. All right, number 29, and they're down one spot from last week, is the LA Kings. So what I did here, these are O-Pee-Chee hockey cards from 2008. I ordered a set of NHL logos from that, and all I did was cut off the O-Pee-Chee off the bottom and turn them into magnets. So there you go. And there'll be another brand new set of magnets debuting very soon, and I'm kind of excited about that, but I couldn't debut them because they're not complete yet. So I've ordered the rest of the ones that I need for that, and fingers crossed that those will arrive before next week's power rankings, although I may use them for news of the day. I don't know. I'm talking about all this because there's not much to say about the Kings other than they're 10 points out of the playoffs now. They're down at the bottom of the West, and that's it for that. Although I do believe they are ahead of the Ducks currently, so let me go ahead and change that around. It's not saying much. They're ahead of the Ducks on the power rankings and in the standings, but really isn't saying much. Tonight against the Predators, they just don't have any punch. They just don't. So, yeah, they're not allowing a ton of goals, but they're not scoring any either. Number 28, and dropping 2 spots from last week. And it's too bad because, these guys keep flirting with being respectable, and then they fall back again, and that's the Ottawa Senators. So number 28 for Ottawa, and there you go. The Senators not making the playoffs, not a surprise to anybody at this point that they're not, but they're ahead of other teams, which is a surprise. I remember in the fall, early fall, people saying, my prediction is Senators won't finish 31st. And I thought, they're probably right, but I can't envision what team could possibly be worse. And then Detroit happened. Detroit went, hey, hold all of our beer, and then give it back to us because we have to drink it before the games. So, yeah, Ottawa, 28th, and it's not the lowest they've been on the charts. Any of these guys reach a new low in this? I don't think so. No, the Kings have been 31st. The Ducks have been 30th before. The Senators have been 31st before, so no, we haven't reached a new low yet. Number 27, moving up 3 spots from last week. Despite the loss tonight, New Jersey's looked okay. They have. The New Jersey Devils, it feels like they're getting better. Sorry, I have to drink something while I'm doing all these long videos or I'm going to lose my voice, so I apologize for that, the pauses. New Jersey, yeah, it's been a long slog for them. They're not making the playoffs, but there is something to be said for being competitive and showing some pride, and that's what I feel like we've been seeing lately from them, is pride in their abilities. Now, that pride may not translate into a lot of wins in the second half. It may not get them really into the race or anything, but at least there's some pride being shown by the Devils, and I like that. Number 26, moving up 1 spot from last week. And speaking of pride, Where'd these Sharks come from? The Sharks in their last 2 games, they've looked like, well, the Sharks. They've looked good. And in their game today, they looked really good. So the Sharks threatening to bust forward and perhaps move up in the standings overall on this board. They move up 1 spot this week, which means they've passed Ottawa, but they're still in kind of a tough position. The back-to-back wins, though, were solid. That win over Pittsburgh was really impressive, and we'll see whether or not they're able to continue this, and if this is actually going to turn into a turnaround that maybe gets them into a playoff spot. It's not going to be easy, though, because the playoffs right now, even in the West, it looks like making the playoffs, it's going to be tough. Because there are a couple of teams that are outside the playoffs that should get hotter in the second half. It's going to be tough for the San Jose Sharks to get in there. Number 25, dropping 3 spots from last week. They might be a good team, but the Rangers aren't getting the results. And, tonight against Vancouver is a good example of it. They just come up short. Huge comeback against Edmonton. They come up short. Against Calgary. Yep, same thing. So there's an issue here where they're not starting very well. You can point your finger at the coach, or you can just say, hey, it's the youngest team in the league. These things are going to happen. And the Rangers weren't really favored to make the playoffs this year anyways. They're 7 points out, so they're not so far out of it that you're going to necessarily fold up your tent if you're the Rangers. But they have to at least be thinking about what they're going to do, because Chris Kreider might be the biggest prize left of pending unrestricted free agents, and they might be able to make a pretty good deal for him, depending on what the market's like as we head towards February. Number 24, dropping 3 spots from last week, is Montreal. Montreal's had some rough luck. Their game tonight against Pittsburgh, they might have deserved a better fate, but Pittsburgh just has this way of winning when they're not supposed to. Pittsburgh's been doing it for, they did it for most of the month of December. Now it looks like they're going to do it again in January. We'll get to my aggravation with the Pittsburgh Penguins soon enough. But 24, is this the lowest that Montreal's gotten? Yes, this is the lowest Montreal's been on the power rankings. It is also the lowest that the New York Rangers have been at 25. So those 2 teams have both hit a new low. I do keep track of the high and low every week. So I go through every Saturday night after I'm done this video, and I make sure I've updated this. And for Montreal and the Rangers, this is the lowest they've been this year. And we'll see whether or not they can pull their way out. Both of them needed to make up some ground tonight, and that didn't really end up happening for them. Although Montreal with 43 points, Rangers with 42, I guess Montreal's closer. Number 23, moving up 1 spot from last week. And there's some life in these Sabres, and I understand. People are going to say, I don't like the Buffalo. You know what? That's fine. That's fine. But Buffalo, I've got logos with all 3 logos on magnets, and I like to use all of them because it shows Buffalo's kind of had this weird existence over the last 25 years where, their identity ends up going back to exactly what it was in the first place. And maybe what happened in their game today is their identity going back to where it was at the start of the year. See, there's a tie in there. So for Buffalo, they move back up into 23rd. They are removed from the lowest they've been on the board, which is 25th. And I do think they can have a run in that second half because they've got Jack Eichel. With Jack Eichel, anything is possible. Number 22, moving up 3 spots from last week. Despite a rather rough game against Vancouver, I'm moving Chicago up to 22nd. Yeah, these guys legit scare me. They do. And, they're at 18 and 6 or whatever the record is right now. It's not a scary record, but they've been getting better as the months go along. And it feels like they're just on the verge of maybe a winning streak here. So we'll see if that ends up happening. But they've moved their way up. They're almost into the top 3 rows. And it's not a dramatic turnaround, but it's definitely been a turnaround for Chicago. Number 21, dropping from 18 last week, is the frustrating and inconsistent Florida Panthers. Falling behind, comebacks, almost tying it, this kind of thing. It's kind of old hat for them. And I guess this is, again, an old logo I'm using here because they're from 10 years ago. So some of them are going to be old logos, as the Ducks and the Kings were as well. But Florida, it's been a rough slog. And right now they're sitting 2 points out of a playoff spot. 2. That's it. And yet they were 1 point out coming into today. But with Tampa's victory, Tampa goes to 50 points. Philadelphia's at 49. So technically, Philadelphia is the team they have in their crosshairs right now. So, things have definitely changed in the East. The Atlantic, it looks like, are going to have at least 3 really good teams. And Florida's not one of them right now. So, Yeah. A couple weeks ago, I was talking about Florida was the better team in Florida, in the state of Florida. Not right now. Number 20, moving up from 23 last week. And was that the lowest they've got? No. No, they started the season lower than that. The Oilers. The Oilers continue their climb. That win in Boston today was pretty authoritative. Mike Smith with a big victory, and really, in all honesty, it wasn't in a whole lot of doubt once that third period got going. So that's a big win for the Oilers. Jumps them back into a playoff spot. They're holding on by the skin of their teeth, but they're back in a playoff spot. They're not back up to first where they were, say, a month ago, but they're still in the running. So Edmonton takes a bit of a jump this week. Number 19, taking a drop from 16 last week, Nashville. So the Predators, that loss to Dallas hurt them, and they beat LA tonight, but I couldn't use that as a reason to have them jump past other teams, because I'm like, well, but it's LA. It is nice, though, to see them win without Ellis. They may have to win without Ellis for a while. We don't know how long he's going to be out, but that Corey Perry elbow was ugly, and that's the kind of elbow that knocks a guy out for a while. So the Predators are starting right without Ellis, but we'll see whether or not they can continue that. And they are sitting currently outside of a playoff spot. They've got to jump 2 teams to get in there. And now people are starting to talk about, what's wrong with Nashville? Did you notice Nashville's not in a playoff spot? Yeah. It's what we're reporting on hockey every single night does, and trying to cover every single team does. I am well aware of which teams are in and not in. And it's weird, because before I had the channel, I wouldn't even be paying attention either. Every now and then I just look and I go, hey, these guys aren't in the playoffs. What's going on? So, yeah, I didn't always pay attention like I do now, which shouldn't surprise anybody. Number 18, moving down 1 spot from last week, is Minnesota. Minnesota, it's been a mixed bag. They're 5-5 in their last 10, but with a win tomorrow night against Calgary at home, and they've beaten Calgary recently as well in Minnesota, things could turn around for them. So Minnesota's not out of this, which might be frustrating to some, less frustrating to others, because there are some who believe this team needs a full rebuild. Eric Stahl has no interest in that because he's too old to go through a full rebuild, and it's highly likely guys like Dubnyk, Zuccarello are also not interested. Suter, Parise. It's a veteran team, so they need to win now if they're going to win. And they've been winning their share, but not often enough to move up past where they are on the board currently. Number 17, dropping from 12 last week. Dropping from 12 is Calgary. Frustrating week for the Flames, and they find themselves outside of a playoff spot tonight. They could be back in tomorrow night, so there's no reason to panic, obviously. It's early January. But it is concerning that they've gone back to some of their bad habits that they had under Peters. Things were going really well under Jeff Ward to start, but it started to come back to earth, and there are some problems with the Flames. So we'll see whether or not they're able to push through and get the results they need over the next few weeks, because it's going to create an interesting situation for Brad Treliving. They trade out Michael Frolik. They trade him to Buffalo. That certainly seems to indicate that they want that cap space so they can go after somebody at the deadline. Could Chris Kreider end up as a member of the Flames? Absolutely. Would that help them? Yes. Would it put them over the top? No. No. It wouldn't put them over the top, but it would make it far more likely they get into the playoffs, and then maybe they can win around, because Kreider's known for playing relatively well in the playoffs, and that's something that they need, is that experience and a guy who can come through with clutch performances in the playoffs. Number 16, dropping from 7 last week. Gravity found the Philadelphia Flyers this week. I don't even want to call them the Flyers right now, because they have fallen. Not flying anywhere right now. Although, this road trip, where they've been in the air likely in between every game, this road trip can end now, and we can never speak of it again. This road trip has been an absolute, total, unmitigated disaster for the Philadelphia Flyers. Carter Hart has started to look very pedestrian in the net, and the Flyers look like they are ready to completely dive bomb their way out of the playoffs. That this is it. So, for teams that are behind them, Florida, Buffalo, Columbus, I think they're the team that's vulnerable. They're the team that can fall out. This has been just, the 6-2 loss tonight. These aren't even close losses for the most part. And, these are games where you'd think they'd get up for it. The game against Arizona tonight, they got to get up for this because they've had a disastrous road trip. Nope. 3 goals against in the first period, and Carter Hart's pulled again. So it's become a problem for Philadelphia, and so they're 16th on the board. Number 15, moving up from 20 last week, Certainly their fans have been on me about not moving them up fast enough. Columbus is doing what it has happened with the board before, where teams are winning games with their own power plays, they're in shootouts, they're not really authoritative victories, right? Or they're getting points, but they're shootout losses and overtime losses. So they move up very, very slowly. Columbus has started to look like a playoff team. And with Philadelphia's complete and total nosedive that's going on, I think Columbus could be the team that jumps in and grabs that spot. Now, are they still going to be there in March? That's a whole other question. But right now, Columbus is playing well enough to make the playoffs. Even in that loss tonight had as much to do with Aaron Dell as anything else. Aaron Dell playing absolutely fantastic for San Jose. And so for Columbus, they still take a massive move up this week, despite that setback against San Jose today. Number 14, dropping from number 11 last week, is the Jets. So when you look at the West, the Jets look like they might be the most vulnerable team to falling out of the playoffs. I know the Oilers would be the default answer for most people. I understand why. But the Jets, I don't know, there's something wrong there. And you saw this week and over the last couple of weeks that when Hellebuck isn't completely on his game, they don't win. They just don't. So they win some games recently because Hellebuck's fantastic. They get a point today against Minnesota because Hellebuck played great. If not for that, they're in trouble. But at the same time, I think they're overplaying Hellebuck. So the Jets are flirting with falling out of playoffs right now. And again, it's still early, but is it? Because we're into the second half of the season. So, number 13, moving up one spot from last week. One spot for Dallas. Yes, they move up one spot this week. I've been impressed with Dallas mostly. They're starting to score, which is really important because if you don't score goals, you're probably not going to win games. I know I'm telling tremendous secrets here of hockey, right? You mean more goals equals wins? Yes. Yes. That's why when I see keys to the game, it's like, score more goals than the other team. Done. I'm out. For Dallas, they've been scoring more goals than the other team, and they've been spotting other teams' leads, which is why I'm happy about the goal scoring. I'm not happy about them spotting leads and allowing the first goal or the first two goals with regularity. So it's a mild move up. I moved them up past Philadelphia and Winnipeg, who they were behind last week, but somebody else passed them. And number 12, dropping from 6th last week, is Boston. And again, if you're following other power rankings and you see Boston rated 2nd or 3rd, you are looking at somebody who's not watching the Boston games. I'm serious as a Boston fan. And if you're a Boston fan going, who cares, we're still 2nd overall. That's the problem. This team's playing like they're 2nd overall. This team's playing like, it doesn't matter. And it's driving me insane. 5-on-5, the scoring over the last couple of games? What's scoring over the last couple of games? So that's a problem. And their goaltending hasn't been as earth-shattering as it was early on. So there's a lot of things to be worried about with Boston, and they're still winning less than half of their games over the last, 2 months now? I can't have them higher than this. They had a 3-game winning streak last week to go back up to 6th, and then this week they lost every game they played, so they're back down to 12th. And the overtime losses don't make me feel any better. They have 11 of them now. That just makes it feel like they've ballooned up their standings with overtime losses, and I actually think teams that are ahead of them on the power rankings board are the better teams right now. And if you're paying attention, you know what teams are still out there to be put on the board. You know who I'm talking about. Number 11, moving up from 19 last week. I got to say, this was one of the most impressive weeks I've ever seen for the Vancouver Canucks. They're now up to a 7-game winning streak. Absolutely fantastic run by the Canucks. They're winning games where they have to score a lot of goals. They're winning games where they don't allow any, where they don't really score much of any. They are winning games that they would have lost last year or the year before. And at a time of year where they're usually falling out of contention, don't look now, they have 50 points. They're on pace for about 97 or 98. And if the Canucks finish with, I'd say 92 or 93, that's a huge success. Even if they don't make the playoffs, they finish with 93 points, that's a big success for Vancouver this year. Now, because they already have 50, Canuck fans would consider that to be kind of a failure. So, they've raised the bar, but they seem to be okay with that. 7 wins in a row. Yeah, it's been pretty impressive. This week was a very impressive week for the Vancouver Canucks. And so, this is a very odd thing. I don't know if this has ever happened before. That the 3 teams that I cheer for are on the board in the order that I cheer for them. The Canucks first, Boston second, Dallas third. It'll never happen again. I'm going to have to take a picture of this and post it to Instagram or Twitter or wherever I post it because it's never going to happen again. But Vancouver, a lot of upward momentum for them. Number 10, moving up from number 15 last week. We are finally seeing the Tampa Bay Lightning. These guys. We are finally seeing the Tampa Bay Lightning playing like, well, the Tampa Bay Lightning. They've won what, 6 in a row now? Yeah, Tampa Bay's playing very, very well. And bad news for everybody is it looks like they're ready to cruise their way into the playoffs, and they could be very dangerous in said playoffs because they're not winning 62 this year. They shouldn't be a team that gets, has everything go to their heads and they don't make the effort. They really didn't against Columbus. Columbus just straight out outworked them in the playoffs in the first round last spring. So this looks like a different Tampa team. It looks like they're peaking at a different time of year than last year. And don't look now, but they look like they could end up with about 100 points. And they could be very, very dangerous in a playoff series. And if it's Tampa and Toronto in the first round, I only have 2 words. Yes, please. Number 9. These guys move up from number 10 last week. Carolina. So the Canes continue to plug along, and they're plugging along at like this steady rate. And right now they're the number 1 wild card, so they would play Boston in the first round. They're the number 1 wild card. They have 50 points. They are behind the Islanders and Pittsburgh. Islanders by 3, Pittsburgh by 5. But they're staying in striking distance. And overall, I still really like what Carolina has going on. I think there's a lot of depth there. There's a lot of scoring there. And if they get the consistent defense and goaltending, look out. So Carolina right now is at number 9. And they move up because Boston takes the nosedive. Otherwise, they would have stayed in the same spot. And they also, no, they didn't pass Winnipeg this week. So yeah, they passed Boston. That's why they moved up. Otherwise, they still would have been number 10. Number 8. Moving up from number 9 last week, New York Islanders. The Islanders continue to be 1 up, 1 down. But, it was pointed out tonight in tonight's game with Toronto and the Islanders that they had that 17-game point streak. That builds up a lot of collateral. You have a lot of, capital is the word I'm looking for. I have a lot of capital. So for the Islanders, did they play great tonight against Toronto? Not really, but they played well. And I think Toronto just kind of outplayed them at their own game. So the Islanders are 8th. I can't have them in the top row. I had them in the top row at some point this week, but they ended up dropping back down to 8th. So, yeah, they passed Boston as well. Otherwise, they would have stayed in the same spot. Number 7, moving up from 13 last week. So moving up 6 spots. And this is that dramatic shift I'm talking about. It's Toronto. Yes. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in the top row for the first time in, it's been a while. They were 22nd here, 19th here, 24th here, which is their low for the year, 22nd, 16th, 13th. So being 7th is 1 spot below the highest they've been on the board all year. So Toronto back in the top row, and I don't know where to start with what's going right with this team. They're getting wins now from their backup goaltender. Matthews looks fantastic out there. Marner's picking up his game. Nylander's an absolute machine. They're getting defense when they need it. Everything's going pretty well for Toronto. So for people who hate Toronto, this time of year is frustrating. And of course, people will predict the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to peak now, and then they're going to fall out of it. And they'll end up being 3rd in the division at best, and then they'll lose in the first round to Tampa Bay or Boston. But this year feels different. But I said that last year too, so I'm going to try not to get too optimistic for the Leafs. But I'm so tired of seeing them lose in the first round. I'm not a Leafs fan, and I'm tired of seeing them lose in the first round. It would be nice to see them change it up, because the Buffalo Bills lost tonight. That's their 6th straight playoff loss, and now it's exactly what I said would happen with. And I feel bad for Bills fans because I didn't pick the Bills to win in my NFL video this week over the entertainment guy. And so I feel kind of bad that that's the only one I've been right about so far, because the Patriots are out. Thank God. I say that because I want to see somebody new win the Super Bowl. But, yeah, Toronto kind of has that Buffalo Bills feel that until we see them win in the playoffs, it is a nice little run, but yeah. And there is some of that with Toronto, so they need to win at least a round in the playoffs. Number 6, moving up from number 8 last week. They're on a nice little run. They're doing very well for themselves. They're back in the top row. The highest they've been this year is 5, and Arizona doesn't drop. They really don't. They're 5 here, 6 here, 6 here, 8 here, 7, and now they're 6 again. So they really don't go through really negative periods as a team. Yes, their first 6 with Taylor Hall in the lineup, they lost 4 of them. That's what caused a bit of a drop, but they've won a few in a row now. That win over St. Louis seems to be a really big catalyst for them. And don't look now, but they look like they are the potentially best team in the division. But there's a team in the division that is ahead of them and deserves to be ahead of them. Number 5, moving down 1 spot from last week. 1 spot. Colorado. Colorado got some big wins this week. And so Colorado makes a move back up. And you get the feeling McCarr's getting it back together. Their first line guys are getting it back together. I still think when everybody's going, Colorado's the team that scares me the most in the West. But right now for Western teams, they are 3rd on this power rankings. So very evenly matched between the West and the East. Now number 4, down 2 spots from last week, are the Capitals. Capitals have been, they're 6-4 in their last 10. There's a 1 up, 1 down mentality here. They did have a nice big win over Carolina, but I don't get the feeling like they're playing the best hockey in the league right now. And it's not as bad as Boston. It's nowhere near as bad as Boston. That's why Boston's down here and Washington's up here. But it does feel like Washington's kind of fallen back a little bit. Now, the lowest they've fallen on the power rankings this year is 11th. They're not going to go that far down again. It would take a pretty massive drop for them to end up 11th again. But for this week, I'm fine with them being 4th, which left me with a really tough decision when it comes to the top 3. So let me explain, even though people are going to fast forward and not hear me. From number 5 to number 3 is Vegas. Vegas, very nice winning streak going for the Vegas Golden Knights. Number 3 is the highest they've been. That ties the highest they've been on the power rankings for the year. They are looking like a contender right now. They came back from 3 goals down against St. Louis. And this is where people say, well, why aren't they ahead of St. Louis? Because coming into today, they were 4th. And so I bumped them up to 3. St. Louis has had a rough week, right? So St. Louis having a rough week. Can I make them number 1? Well, no. So they dropped from number 1 to number 2. We'll get into what's alarming about this in a minute. St. Louis had a rough week. I didn't feel that it was rough enough to warrant dropping them down to 5th. Again, I don't want these power rankings to be just completely reactionary or they're worthless. So to me, St. Louis, they had the big lead against Vegas and they blew it. I can't see them doing that again. That's one of those things that happens that you end up scratching your head about. It's the first time Vegas has ever been able to come back from 3 goals down. So Vegas jumps past the Capitals. They were number 5 behind the Avalanche coming into this week, so they do move up 2 spots. St. Louis drops from 1st to 2nd. I'm going to be closely monitoring what St. Louis does this week, because if they have another week like this one, they'll probably end up down about 4th. Again, I don't want to have just completely reactionary power rankings where a team can have 2 bad weeks and go from 1st to 9th or 10th, because that's what used to happen before, and it just makes it seem like it's just too easy. That being said, moving up from 3 last week to number 1 this week. They were number 5 the week before, number 9 the week before that. This is the first time they've been number 1 on a power rankings that I can remember. And I mean that. I don't remember the Pittsburgh Penguins being number 1 on the power rankings. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't. But I'm going to say this straight out. The Pittsburgh Penguins, what they've been able to do with so many injuries, not just injuries, but key players being out. They lose Jake Gensel, they still come out and win a game against the Montreal Canadiens. They still are competitive against the San Jose Sharks and push that one into overtime. So for Pittsburgh, this is a team that won the most games in December of anybody. I think they had I know they were 10-2 in December. I don't know if that was the most wins anybody had in December, but they were fantastic. And it looks like in January, they're getting ready to do it again. So tomorrow, I'm going to go ahead and cheat and look at the boards here. Tomorrow, the Pittsburgh Penguins are at home against Florida in a matinee game. So that'll tell me a lot about whether or not Pittsburgh is legitimately playing the best hockey in the league. But to my mind, they are. And I know people are going to give credit to Jari, but look, Murray went out tonight and saved 24 out of 26 and gets the win. So there's a lot of factors here for me that just, Pittsburgh's number one. There's no bias in making Pittsburgh number one. It's something that when I saw that, I thought, oh, they're number one. Because St. Louis did have a rough week. The Capitals, I did not feel were number one in the league. And I don't feel Vegas is there yet. Vegas is close. Another week like we just saw, Vegas could very well be number one next week. But there you go. There's your power rankings for January 4th of 2020, your first power rankings of 2020. And even I'm surprised at some of the teams as to where they are on the board, which I think that's good. I think it's good that I look at some of these teams and I go, wow, so Pittsburgh's number one, Tampa's top 10, Vancouver's up to 11. These are good things because it tells me that the board's still in control, that I don't control the board as much as it just kind of... I explained last week how I do my power rankings. For anybody who's curious, I recommend going and watching that video because it tells you how I weigh each game, how I weigh each result, and I weigh each result every single night. And that's how Pittsburgh ends up being number one. They're playing some fantastic hockey. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as you will. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.